The first thing a listener needs to do is figure out where they are right now. And so in the book, I call it the litmus test. It's the 1, 3, 5, 10 test. And just to give the audience very simple math on it, it's basically assets over liabilities equals net worth. How much we own versus how much we owe equals our net worth. And I ask the reader to compare that to their annual income.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have on the show Matt Manero. Matt launched his first company, commercial fleet financing, in 1995 with a phone, a folding table, and the unyielding confidence of a single client, a trucker. Fast forward 23 years and CFF has funded over $1 billion in transportation equipment with annual business of $150 million plus. As a speaker, audiences resonate with his tough-minded and business battle-tested philosophies on company culture, skilling up and scaling up, and finding your grit. Matt's latest book, You Need More Money, Wake Up and Solve Your Financial Problems Once and For All, has just been published by Penguin Random House. It's my great pleasure to have Matt with us today. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you, James. It's my pleasure on Labor Day to be here.
So share with everyone what's going on in your life just now.
Well, I am very busy. The book hit number 44 on Amazon last week, which I thought was very good. And then, we're in the middle of a record year with my primary business, which we finance truckers. So, as you would say in the UK, lorries, and people never wonder who finances lorries. And so it's a sort of a niche of a niche of a niche, but it'll be another record year, which is about 7 years in a row of record sales. So
where did this all begin for you? Where did your kind of entrepreneurial journey start?
Yeah, I was always that kid mowing lawns and shoveling snow. I always knew that I was going to be successful. I really just had no idea where it was going to come from. But it is interesting. I never doubted it for a second that I was going to be okay. I think it's a very important takeaway for the audience, which is, the power of seeing it or believing it long before it occurs, to me, is almost vital. The most successful people I know have done the exact same thing. They always saw the future before it happened. I had no idea it was going to be in this business. It was not an easy road. I never really had a mentor. No one ever took me underneath their wing, ever. It never happened at my house. It never happened on the field. It never happened at my friend's house. It never happened in school. It never happened after all of that. I literally, if someone was to say, that old saying, show me your five closest friends and I'll show you your life. I never had that. And it was a very weird deal. I spent a lot of time alone, trying to figure out what was my purpose in this life, because no one ever took me under their wing and said, hey, Manero, you're talented in this area. This is what you should do. No one ever did that. And so I had to find it all on my own.
So what your way of finding that, I know some people use books. They find an author or authors that really resonate with them, and that helps them find their journey. Some people use, obviously, spirituality, and some people just through sheer grit and determination and making mistakes find their purpose. How did you arrive at it?
Yeah, I would say it's a mixture of two of what you mentioned. I'm a lifelong learner. I wasn't a very good student, but I always enjoyed learning. I was always extremely curious, and I still am today. My youngest son and I were just talking about that this morning, the importance of curiosity. But without question, it was sheer determination, an incredibly high tolerance for pain. The entrepreneurial pain too, which is what I think a lot of people don't have. They really just don't have the ability to stay in the fight long enough. And therefore they end up in this pain side of their small business for way too long, and maybe even forever. And that's a very sad thing for me to see. So it's those two. I was a lifelong learner, still am, and then absolutely the ability to just grind it out day in and day out.
Now, you mentioned this idea of having almost like visualizing what the end the end's going to be. I was talking to David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done, a great book, and he said, I said, where did you start on writing your book? And he said, I started writing the reviews first. And he said, I wanted to write reviews. I wanted to get in my head what people who'd be writing the reviews, what they'd be saying about it, what value they were getting from the book. And then, only then did I write it. So you talk about this idea about lifestyle by design, about using visualization in a very kind of strategic way as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't have a book in me. I know a lot of authors talk about that. They say this book has lived with me my entire life. I didn't have any of that. My most recent book is about tragedy that happened to us, in which my wife lost her only brother a few years ago. He died at 46 years old. And if that wasn't tragic enough, he died with leaving a wife and 4 children, no health insurance, no life insurance, and $100 in the bank. And so through that process, it was a tremendous wake-up call for me, because I saw the despair of my brother-in-law, who we all loved so much, because he was leaving his family in a bad financial spot. And then I also saw the ability of what money can do when my wife and I dropped in and handled all of their bills during that period of time in an effort to try to get him better. And he died almost 1 year to the day, unfortunately, so it didn't work. But that was the genesis of the book. It was, how do I tell this story to sort of purge some of our pain? And then through researching the book after I got a book deal, it was, oh my gosh, I can't believe this many people are in this spot. And so I just sort of went on a little bit of a mission and a crusade to tell the story and to give my version of a roadmap that I think anybody can follow on how they can fix their money situation. Because it truly is, and I'm not sure what to say about the UK, but in the United States, it's an absolute epidemic. The behindness, the lack of preparation financially is an absolute epidemic, and it will transfer down through generations, and it's already starting, right? My generation is beginning to take care of our parents, and if my generation doesn't get it right, our children may not be able to take care of us, let alone take care of our parents. So there's a true massive gap being created between the upper class and the lower class in America, and I believe it's far more pressuring on our society than it is than politics. I think this economic disparity, this difference between the haves and the have-nots, is going to put tremendous pressure on our world and our society.
I think you also see it with generational divides as well, kind of going on. We got a lot of the baby boomers who, many of them were able to save and have more have properties and things, where you've got this younger generation coming, generation rent, who have no real financial stability there. I was reading something the other day saying this is like the lowest generation of buying motor vehicles, for example. They're just not buying because it's, there's Uber and there's other things. So the spending habits are changing. But the thing I was interested in your book was, for many of those readers who probably are at airports and they pick up a business book as well, they're doing okay. They're doing okay in life, average kind of maybe middle class kind of life. Sometimes struggle to make some bills, but in the end, it's kind of, they just get by. But your book really gives a bit of a kick up the backside to that notion, doesn't it? Saying, maybe you don't want to settle. So for anyone that's listening or watching this just now, who's maybe in that position where they think, I'm doing okay. I don't have much money in the bank there in savings, but I'm able to put food on the table every day. What should they be thinking?
Well, James, the first thing a listener needs to do is figure out where they are right now. And so in the book, I call it the litmus test. It's the 1, 3, 5, 10 test. And just to give the audience very simple math on it, it's basically assets over liabilities equals net worth. How much we own versus how much we owe equals our net worth. And I ask the reader to compare that to their annual income. So in their 20s, I suggest that they should have 1 times their annual income as their net worth. So if someone makes $50,000 in their 20s, they should have a $50,000 net worth. That can come wherever they want. They can come from cash, they can come from stocks, it can come from equity in a home, car equity. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's 1 time. Where it starts to get dangerous is when we move into our 30s. We need 3x. So if in our 30s now we're making $100,000, well, 3 times is now $300,000, and really starts to get scary in our 40s where I believe it's 5 times. So now if we're making $200,000, 5x times 200 is $1 million. And in our 50s, we need 10x. So now if we're making $300,000 a year in our 50s, we're in the peak of our earning cycle. I argue that we need to have 10 times our annual income as your net worth. That's $3 million. And when you start to run that scenario out, most people are way behind. And then I go into the argument of what is $1 million, right? So if someone has $1 million, and I'm not disputing the fact that if they don't have $1 million should be a goal. But $1 million, if you put it into tax-free municipal bonds and you got a 3% rate of annual return, that's $30,000 a year. I mean, that is not Tuscany in the summer. Yeah. That is not driving the motorhome. And so people need to understand the money is moved, right? And we're chasing these old income numbers of whether it's $100,000 a year or, look, James, I ask audiences when I speak, when I graduated college in 1991, to be in the top 1% of earners, you needed to make $100,000 a year. And I will ask the audience today, what do you think it takes in annual income to be in the top 1%? And the responses are unbelievable. I mean, some people will say, $2 million. Some people will say $150,000. The number is $384,000. So to be in the top 1% of earners in America, you need to earn $384,000. And yet, when I graduated in 91, it was 100. So the money's moved. Everything has become more expensive. But we are still, as a society, still chasing the numbers, and these numbers are ridiculously low. And that's the scary part about the book. But the good news is it's only for the first half of the book. The second half, I give the roadmap on how people can actually fix that problem and change it and make up the gap regardless of where they are. It's not as difficult as people think to make up the gap.
So for many people, if they're working a 9-to-5 job, their income level is relatively fixed. Obviously, it's going up a little bit every time. But obviously, you're an entrepreneur. You're very much going to be as an entrepreneur. So is the secret to do what should we be thinking about? Should we be looking to supplement if someone has a 9-to-5 job with an entrepreneurial part of your business, or should they just be kind of really going all in and really focusing on building something that's going to add a lot of value to their lives, their families' lives, and to the people that they serve?
Yeah, the first thing is people need to challenge their employer if that is their course, right? So if the employer is coming to them and saying, well, we'll give you a 3% pay raise every year, the employee needs to challenge that entire notion that even should exist, because a 3% pay raise does not ever help you get rich, ever. And so if you as the employee only feel as though the value you're bringing to the organization is worth 3%, well, I suppose that's what you deserve. But I challenge the reader to never feel as though that's the value prop that they bring to the organization, and therefore leverage it up. I tell the readers exactly how to go and get a raise, immediately exactly what to do. And if your boss says no, it's going to tell you a couple of things. Maybe you're not bringing the value, so it's a wake-up call for you. Or maybe your boss is taking advantage of you, and then you got to really get that backbone ready to bust out and leave. Look, I love how LinkedIn does it. Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn does it this way. They only issue 6 months or 12 months employment contracts, James. That's it. Wow. And so they say to the employee, listen, we'll give you 110% for 6 months if you'll give us 110% for 6 months. And can we agree on that? Yes. And both the employer and the employee work their butt off for 6 months or 12 months. And at the end, they come back together and they say, did you have fun? Did you like that? Yeah, I enjoyed it here a lot. Well, we enjoyed having you. You want to go another 6 months? Yeah, let's go another 6 months. Because the idea that a 20-year career for the gold watch, it's over. And for employers, they need to understand that this new generation that's coming in, they get it. The new hire, the new employee understands how the game of employer-employee works better than the old employer does. And so we constantly have to be giving value to this new generation that's coming up. Otherwise, they're going to leave. They're incredibly confident. And they will say, I'm not getting what I want, and money's only a piece of it. I'm not getting the fulfillment I want. I'm out of here. And so employers are challenged to build this new type of a culture which embraces the fact that we should be able to maximize our time together, and then we should be able to part as friends. because that is the only way that I see the future of employer-employee working out.
So it's really, everyone has to almost become an intrapreneur, even if they don't necessarily think they are at this stage, because it's just that's the way that things are going. They have to kind of almost have an entrepreneurial mindset, even if they're working inside a larger organization.
If you want to get rich. Now, you don't have to want to get rich. I'm perfectly fine with that. Look, I use an example in the book. I have a client who drives a truck for 6 months out of the year, and the other 6 months he surfs in Costa Rica. And he makes just enough as a truck driver to be able to surf in Costa Rica for 6 months. He's the happiest guy I know. He doesn't have any money if something happened to him, but he's extremely happy and he's living his lifestyle by design. So I would never be so gregarious to tell someone what their lifestyle by design should be. But I do argue that most people are either way behind financially or not living their lifestyle by design. And to me, that life sucks.
Now, there's something that's also changed, obviously, with the younger generation, is this idea of getting to 65, retiring, going and spending time on a golf course or something is kind of, it's not really there. And you're hearing a lot more of this idea of almost like mini retirement. Something like Tim Ferriss made this kind of very popular, where you will work for 5 years, really focus on whatever you're doing, and then you will take a period of time to reskill, to retrain, to refresh, and then go on a next journey. Now, I'm guessing a strategy like that requires a different type of financial planning than someone who is thinking that they're just going to work until they're 65 and then that's it, income stops.
Yeah, it requires a lifestyle by design, right? It requires that individual to be planning what they want their life to look like. I mean, I was watching an interview with Pitbull recently, and Pitbull went through the nomenclature of the last 10 years of his life. He knew exactly what each year was going to look like. He had a tagline for each year, and it gave him incredible focus. And in fact, last year for Pitbull was net worth accumulation. The year before was world domination, right? And so we didn't hear much from Pitbull last year. Why? Because Pitbull was getting all his ducks in a row for net worth accumulation, because the prior year he put out his album that was called World Domination, right? So people who lead their lives by their design are far happier and most of the time more financially well off than 90% of the rest of us who just go through the motions every day and keep our fingers crossed that the money's going to work out. And the one thing I can tell you in your audience is that every one of us will have to answer one question. And we will do it at either 24 or 34 or 64 or 84. Did we or did we not win at the game of money? And the way you determine it is, I was able to do everything I told myself and my spouse and my children and my friends that I was going to be able to do, or I just pulled my hand off the throttle and I gave up, and I didn't. And I just only know one answer to that question: win.
Now, one of the ways to kind of tilt the table in your favor is obviously to build wealth through starting your own business and kind of going that route. However, you talk about something on a video recently I saw, which it made me laugh, which was that you must kill the Superman in your business. So obviously you get a lot of technicians who are very skilled at a particular thing, and they say, I'm going to start a business, and they go and start a business. And then this kind of thing happens, and obviously we know that the numbers of businesses that fail after a year or 2 years. Can you describe, that killing the Superman? Because I think that's actually quite a fun way of thinking about it.
Yeah, so I would also disagree with the premise that I believe most people should be entrepreneurs. In fact, I believe most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who, when he and I became friends 12 years ago, he was paying for his bills out of the checks that come with the credit cards. I don't know if you remember those or not, where your credit card company would send you a stack of checks and say, feel free to go and write
yes,
checks.
I do remember. I think they existed for a long time with some ridiculous interest rates. I seem to remember.
He was paying his bills off of those credit cards 12 years ago. And when I talked to him last week, he was driving to his office in a Bentley, and he has about a $30 million net worth. 100% derived from stock options of the company that he's with. The stock has split 9 times in the last 12 years. So I believe that most people should not be entrepreneurs, and they actually should be an intrapreneur within another type of an organization. And so I think that's really important. But for those who are entrepreneurs, they can't get it out of their system. Maybe they're a lousy employee. They have this wonderful idea and they go for it. I support you 100%. But eventually what has to happen in that organization, and it was very hard for me to do this in my business, very, very hard. But you have to stop being the Superman or Superwoman, in which everything must go through you. All decisions must be made by you. No one has authority. And you actually think that that's how the business grows because you're so intelligent and you're so omnipresent and you're so perfect that no one around you can make decisions. And I'm telling you, I gritted that mindset out to $100 million a year business. And when I killed Superman, we went down to 70 million for a little less than a 12-month period of time. And this year we'll do 170 or 180 million. And I almost make no decisions in the organization anymore. Almost zero. My entire executive management team does all that, including hiring and firing.
But I'm guessing in order to make that work, you have to have quite a strong culture, company culture, in order that when people have decisions to make, they have a preset almost. They know from a gut perspective what they should be doing, what the right choice is.
Well, not from a gut perspective. They have that foundational principles through a predetermined company culture that they signed up for, right? And without company culture, your staff is filled with people who have no idea what the company stands for, what the owner stands for. In fact, most people would think the owner's a lunatic, he or she's a crazy person. And they're just guessing at what their job consists of every day. And I would challenge the audience to take the time to figure out what was the business designed to do in the first place, down to what visualization of colors, what did you expect it all to look like? And then what was the emotional feel, the energy feel of the place? And go back, take the time and rebuild it. My next book, which will come out next year, is called The Torch, How to Torch What You Like to Get What You Love, which is what I did here. I blew up a $100 million business, which I liked, to build something that I loved, which is the business that I have now. And we're growing at 35% a year off of $100 million. It's a pretty big number. So it is possible. It is required for those who want to get out of the pain side of small business. Look, if you want to be a one-person cabinet maker, go for it. I would challenge you that that's a bad business. It has no sellability to it. It's very difficult to recruit people. You'll probably miss a lot of your family events and games and stuff. Your customer will be in charge of your life rather than you being in charge of your life. But if that's the way you want to go for it. But if you want to go past that, it starts with culture. It starts with mission statement. Period. End of story.
Now, in your own journey, could you tell us about a key aha moment, a light bulb moment, a time when you decided this is where you wanted to go with your life, what you wanted to kind of really do with your business? You mentioned this kind of idea of purpose. You talked about that story about your brother-in-law, but was there another kind of key insight or aha moment you've had?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot over the last few years, but the one bottom was when I once we hit that $100 million number, and I did a TEDx talk on this called The Torch, but I just wasn't happy. I thought I was supposed to be so happy. I had more money than I ever thought I was going to make. I had helped other people in the office become millionaires. I mean, we were rocking and rolling. Just wasn't happy. And I began to stop being a motivational guy in my office, and I started to be a browbeater and a bully. And I can remember being in this studio set up very differently because I had a radio show at that time, and my IT guy he just constantly made mistakes. We would get a caller and then he would drop the caller, and it was just, today I don't even have the anger for it today that I did back then, because now I would actually work through it and we talk through it. But at the time I was yelling and screaming, and I told him, "You're going to get this thing right or you're fired." And of course he gets it wrong. I destroyed my studio. I smashed every flat screen in it. I broke every lighting thing in it. And then I threw the mic at the guy. And when I walked out of this studio, I saw every employee standing up, 30 some odd people looking at me. And they didn't look at me they just looked at me with disgust, man. Like, who have you become? I mean, this is not the guy I signed up for. And I remember going into my office, I shut the door and I just cried, man. I just cried like a baby saying, what the hell happened? How did this happen to you? You were the fighter for the underdog, man, the injustice, give people a chance, right? Fight against the establishment. That's who I was. And I had basically become the establishment. And I hated myself for that. I felt like I really sold out. And then I made the choice that instant. By the way, I'm here to tell your audience that zebras can change their stripes, right? I used to say zebras can't change their stripes. They can change their stripes. I'm living proof of it, that people who are one way in an instant can change and pivot and be something different. And I challenge everyone to figure if that pivot is necessary, first off. Not everyone does. Some people are happy, right?
You don't have to get to the point of throwing TVs off. It doesn't have to be that extreme. But yeah, I think we've all had that in our lives where we've just you could be more. You're not living up to your values, or you're not living up to your potential, and you're letting yourself down. And you had a really visual, because you had 30 members of your team looking at you, all reflecting that back as well.
With disgust.
Yeah.
Totally. Just with absolute disgust. So that was a very low point in what we're talking about. Listen, I've had countless other low points. I talk about a lot of them in my book, lying to my wife about finances in the early stages of this business. I drank way too much. I haven't had a drink since March of 1997. That was a low point in my life that I'm happy I got past. I mean, look, I've had a lot of low points, but I believe the beauty is not the high point for me. The beauty is recognizing the low point and then the climb back. And that's a weird thing because most people don't like the hardness of it. I love the hardness of it. I love the difficulty of the climb.
And the word that you have just behind you just now, that word grit, I think encompasses that. What it takes to kind of go through that. Those darkened nights as well.
Yeah.
As we start to finish up here, I'd love to know, are there any tools that you find or apps that you find very useful in doing the work that you do?
Well, I meditate a lot. I use Headspace to meditate. That is really quite an amazing thing. I've been doing that for about a year now. And the thought that 3 to 5 minutes of predetermined meditation can completely unwind the rubber band that is often wound up very tight for me, is incredible. How I can get 24 hours of unwoundness from that 3 to 5 minute meditation session. So I like that. I spend a lot of time with my boys. I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 13-year-old. There's no app that can be sufficient for that. And I listen and I read probably 2 hours a day, every day. Something. Today I've probably done 4 hours worth since 5 o'clock this morning. I just have this insatiable appetite. I don't care where it comes from. Some days it might be Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. Some days it might be Ed Milet or Cardone. I don't care where it comes from. I just have this insatiable appetite for someone else's story, right? And eventually, though, by the way, we have to stop being the student, right, and actually become the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm moving into now is how can I teach? That's why I'm doing a deal. I bought into a company called Business Finishing School. We're doing our first boot camp, our 14th boot camp, my first being involved in it in Dallas in September. I have the other book coming out. I'm still pushing this book. I mean, the rest of my life, James, will be as a teacher. Which, by the way, I knew when I was 13 years old. I had a football coach hammering on me at practice one day, and I just said to myself, that's what I'm supposed to do. I just knew it with crystal clarity. I just couldn't make any money doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so I got away from it for all those years, and now what's funny is I'm coming back to it, right? And that's what I'll finish out as a teacher.
Well, it's great, and it's. I mean, you mentioned Charlie Munger. He's one of my heroes as well. An incredible book that he wrote. This big coffee table book as well. That someone that's obviously been very successful in business, but actually he's very keen to share these principles and these ideas, not just in terms of business, but also in terms of life. So I might put a little bit of a link to that Charlie Munger book as well that you're talking about. And then, what about if you were to recommend one other book, not one of your own books? What would that book be?
Well, there's so many. I think, my favorite book of all time is the 10X Rule by Cardone. Came out in 2011. That was a big game changer book for me. From a business standpoint, I don't think there's a better book than E-Myth. You mentioned it earlier. Michael Gerber's book E-Myth is just timeless. It never goes away. And so those are two of my faves. I'm not a fiction guy. I'm a nonfiction guy. I like the truth of stories. So that's it. Just on the Charlie Munger thing and the Buffett thing, the thing that impresses me most about those guys is so little of what impresses me about those guys is their wealth accumulation. And so much of it is their adherence to ethics and their requirement of ethics, that they just won't even entertain you if they don't consider you highly, highly ethical. And that one principle is what Warren Buffett says is the tenet of their success. And so I would completely agree with that, though. Once you let that rat into your room, your whole life can be destroyed by one person. And so I challenge people to be very sensitive, not judgmental, different, but very sensitive of who they actually let into their room, whether it's through advice or friendship or love, because that one decision literally could make or break your life.
So Matt, a final question for you. I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. You've got all the skills, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you, you know no one. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
There's no question I would go into artificial intelligence, period. And I think that's going to change the face of our world. I would do three things, and I talk about it in the book. I would go into artificial intelligence, I would go into cybersecurity, or I would go into virtual reality. Probably of those three, without question, I would go into artificial intelligence. Just look with an Alexa, right? I have one in my office. I use it constantly, right? And that's like the worst version of artificial intelligence. Could you imagine what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years?
Even now, like obviously you know about the trucking business as well. Here in Europe, we have all those. I think in Germany now they have the self-driving trucks going in convoys as well, and that's obviously all powered by. And there's AI underneath all of that as well. So we're living in very interesting times, very 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 powerful times.
James, I would do one other thing, though, which I'd love to share. The other thing I would do is I would spend a tremendous amount of time working on my network. And I had a lot of self-esteem issues as a kid, and I think that carried over into my business life, too. And if I had known the people that I know now 15 years ago, who knows? But I was so sheltered, I figured I had to be somebody before I could know somebody. And I was so wrong, because all I had to do to know somebody was just be a good friend and be transparent and say to them, I'm not you, but I'd sure like to be you one day. Would you be interested in helping me with that journey? And 90% of them would have said, of course. Yeah. But I didn't. And so it cost me probably at least a decade of my success thinking that I had to do it all myself. And that was a huge mistake.
Now, if people want to check out the book, learn about the book, learn about other things that you have going on, obviously you talk about the podcast as well, where's the best place for them to go and learn about that?
Sure, it's mattmanero.com everywhere. The book is You Need More Money. The podcast is You Need More Money. And so they can just Google Matt Manero and see whatever they want to find on me.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing about the book, this great book that's just coming out, and also for sharing all about your creative life. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.